Everybody, thank you for joining us. We've got very lucky to have Tom Slingsby and Iain Jensen with us. As everyone knows, Tom Slingsby, Moth world champion, Iain Jensen, Olympic medalist. To be honest, they've both won about everything there is to win. We've got a Moth world 6 weeks away. We've got with us, two of the best Moth sailors in the world. They both won the two recent events. Goobs winning the Italian nationals, and Tom Slingsby and Slingers winning the foiling week. I just want to take this opportunity to try to extract as much information as we can from them, give everybody else the chance who's going to the Worlds to try to learn a bit from their knowledge and try to get up to the speed that these guys are doing, which between them they won most of the races down there. So let's start with foiling with the Italian nationals, and Goobs, why don't we come to you first? Looked like you sort of came out the blocks pretty nicely down at the Italian nationals. You and Francesco Bruni. I think Slingers was just finding his feet a bit in his boat. But why don't you just talk us through the Italian nationals a bit and how it all went down there? Obviously down in Torbole, which we haven't really sailed at recently. So tell us a bit about the regatta.
Yeah, so we had 3 days of racing. We had three races on each day. 2 of the days were in a really, really windy aura. And it was out of Torbole, so it was a right-handed track. You were sort of starting on port and heading into the cliffs, and then after you go through the top mark gate, doing an early jibe to get back over to that favoured side. It was a more or less a speed track. There's not too many manoeuvres, and it was really windy and pretty wavy as well, which meant that getting downhill was sometimes a little tricky. And then on the last day, they raced us in the northerly, which was a bit shiftier and a few more options, and a little bit lighter as well. So bit of a different day, and saw a few more mixed results. And Tom was finding his feet pretty well and came out pretty strong with a couple of wins on that day to close it right up.
Got you. And well, Tom, you certainly got your beaker very much a week before that event, and you were sort of finding your feet in it. Tell us the learning process with the new boat and how it all sort of came together for you.
Yeah, I had the boat quite a bit earlier, I guess. I got it in end of January, but I probably got about 8 days of sailing in Australia before I sent it over to Italy. It was, honestly, the learning process was fine. I just I had a bit of a bad day, and I had a wrong setting, I guess. Coming from the Exocet, I knew my wand length numbers in the Exocet, and then I just sort of tried to convert that over to the beaker and lengthened it all a little bit for the longer foils. But in the end, I had too long a wand, and day one was probably 20 knots or so plus with pretty big waves. And the shortest I could get my wand was too long. I wasn't sure that was the issue, but when I came in, I went and checked Goobs' boat and Francesco Bruni's boat, and they were able to get their wand a lot shorter. And I made the change for day 2, and I was able to get downwind comfortably and no issues. So it was just my error. I didn't set the boat up quite right for waves, and it was a pretty simple change. And after that, I was very comfortable downwind and upwind, and then I was sort of in the race with those guys.
Yeah, got you. So that's probably long wand, either making you foil too high or just making the gearing too slow as you would adjust the ride height to compensate. Goobs, let's just go back to these starting then. Port tack starting, it's pretty treacherous. What was the technique? And I mean, I guess if everyone's on port, it's all right. But when it's a bit of a 50-50, what is it? Is it just close your eyes and go for it?
Yeah, I think the way you do it so as to minimize risk is you sort of move the game towards the pin a little bit. and that gives you a bit of room. If it looks like you're not going to cross boats, you can still duck them and lay the boat end. So that was my strategy, at least. A few guys were getting right off the boat, and they were either going to have a really good start, or if they had to duck a boat, they might have to crash tack at the windward end. But I was sort of moving it a little bit further up the line, and it sort of meant you could get going. And as you're going across, you could judge whether you're going to cross some of these boats or whether you need to do the duck. And if you had to do the duck, it wouldn't be a big problem because you knew that you had space to the committee boat and you weren't going to have to tack before you went across the start line.
Yeah, got you. And Slingers, what was your sort of port tack strategy?
Yeah, I was learning on the fly. I haven't done that in years, and but yeah, pretty much is exactly what Goob says. It's pretty much a pin end racetrack reversed. So it's kind of like if you're trying to get the pin end and into the cliffs, but yeah, we're reversed with that. So the boat end was essentially the congested end, and people are trying to hit that, but it's exactly the same as a normal start, just reversed, except you've got to keep an eye out for starboard tackers. As the regatta went on, there were less and less starboard tackers, and it started to become pretty much everyone on port. So then it's just a reverse start. Pin end was favoured, and you'd go up the line to reduce risk. I see these pictures. This was one of the only times Goobs was probably below me off the start. He was generally sort of 3, 4, 5 boats up from me, and I was probably having a bit more risk, which you could probably see in the results. I had a few worse results than Goobs, and it was often because I was at the congested end of the line and Goobs was a bit clearer.
Yeah, got you. All right, and then, I mean, we look at the results, we see Beaker's the first 3 boats. You two have both made the change from an Exocet to a Beaker, and Goobs, you're happy. I mean, I think Goobs, you've probably had all the boats over the years, Mac 2s, Exocets, and now a Beaker. You're happy with your new boat?
Yeah, no, I am. I definitely feel like in above 11 knots, there's no other boat that's probably going to be as quick as the Beaker at the moment. And below 11 knots, I think that they're making some good steps forward. They've I think part of the issue is we have such long verticals now that when you're trying to take off, you take that wetted surface drag of the extra length. Yeah. So they're looking at ways to reduce that wetted surface in the lighter air, and making some good steps forward for improving that light air takeoff. So I'm pretty comfortable with where we are moving into the Worlds in September, and I think we'll be covered over the whole range by the time we get there. And at the moment, I'd say that definitely the fastest boat in over 11, very competitive in 9 to 11, and maybe if there is a weakness, it's maybe just in really marginal foiling conditions at the moment.
Yeah, got you. And Slingers, where do you feel speed wise? I mean, you're pretty happy. Obviously, you're going quick enough.
Yeah, no. The Beaker's definitely quick. I obviously sailed the Exocet at the last Worlds and had good boat speed. But in a lot of the training with you, Rob, where we were racing with Scott Babbage and Matt Chu, my feeling was at sort of 18 knots of wind speed that you'd get a gust and the Exocet really didn't go any quicker. If anything, you'd get a 20-knot gust and it felt like the drag went up and the boat speed actually decreased. And my feeling was that the Beaker actually was always increasing. Every time you'd get a gust, it felt like they would accelerate further, and we were hitting a real aero wall where we just had too much drag. So that was really my reason for switching from the Exocet to the Beaker. I just felt it's a little slipperier and a little less drag. The foils are really nice. And so, yeah, I switched over this year. And, yeah, as exactly what Goob said, I think above 11 knots, as soon as we can hike hard and if we can get the boat rolled into windward, the boat's a little heavier and longer foils. And so as soon as it feels to me that you can use that riding moment by getting windward heel and fully stretch hiking, the boat's much quicker. We get very easy speed upwind it feels, and in fully powered conditions. And then echoing Goob's comments, it gets a pretty even 9 to 11, and then below 9, I do feel the exocets are pretty quick below 9. But yeah, we're making some changes to hopefully reduce that deficit under 9 knots at the Worlds.
And we touched on foils there. What are you guys doing foil-wise? I know there's a few options with that boat. When are you changing foils, and what's your thought process behind it all?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm running the V4, which is the standard small, essentially, foil for the Beaker. I run that probably from 10 knots, 10, 11 knots to and up. And then I've got a V3, which is sort of their big foil. I've got that, which I have been using below 10 knots. But that's, they now have a V6, which we've been testing, which is a new light air foil. And I've tested it one day. When I go back at the end of August to Lake Garda, I'll test it then again. But so I'll probably, at these Worlds, I'll run a V4 and a V6, which is a standard small, and then the new experimental large, which is the same area as the small, with more camber in the flap. So it'll have a little slower top speed, not as great glide time, but it has the same lift off. In first day testing it, it felt like a really good foil. So that's exciting. And then, yeah, I'll let Goobs talk about it, but Goobs runs the V5, which is a little bit smaller. It's kind of like a super small main foil. He uses that whenever I'm on my V4. He's 5 kilos less than me in body weight, and he quite likes it, but Goobs can talk about that.
Yeah, tell us, Goobs.
Yeah, so I've got that V5 and I've got the V4. I don't really notice the difference with the V5 to the V4 in boat handling once you're above 12 knots, and that's kind of the range you want to be using it anyway, I think. And it feels just a little bit slipperier downwind. And where I thought I might have had trouble, I thought I might have been struggling a little bit for height sometimes at the bottom end of the range upwind. It doesn't seem to be an issue. I've been using it. I've intentionally been using it sort of under range occasionally. So I've had it out in sort of 9, 10, 11 knots. And it feels like once you can get the boat up and going at around 15 knots of boat speed, you can point just as well as you can with the V4. So I'm really happy with that extra small. And like Tom, I don't have the V3. I never got the V3, which is the original Beaker Big. But I've got the V6 as well. And I just haven't used it yet. So at the moment, I'm thinking I'll probably wind up on the V5, which is the extra small, and the new experimental big, like Tom.
Yeah, got you. Interesting. Just got a question in here from one of the people online, basically asking, how do you set up your pull rod length, going in the boat, essentially your bias adjuster or your ride height adjuster. What's your setup for each day? When you launch for the day, how do you set up your ride height adjuster? How do you go about doing it? People do it in different ways. Why don't you both give us your top tip on that?
I'll go first. For me, when I set up the exocet, I used to adjust the ride height often, all the time, really. And now I'm in the Beaker, I don't touch it. Sometimes I need to do a little adjustment for heavy air to lighter air, and if it's lighter air I need to add a little bit more lift, but it's literally 2 inches of rope that I need to change. But so when I'm on port tack upwind, I want my wand to be maximum length, and I set that to be my perfect ride height, and then from there I adjust the wand length, tack to tack and upwind to downwind. I obviously go a little shorter downwind and pretty similar tack to tack downwind, and then shorter on starboard tack upwind than port. So for me, my ride height adjuster is just set to have the sort of high ride height port tack upwind, because that's when you're most heeled into windward and your wand has got to be at its longest. and then I adjust my wand from then on. I won't touch my right height adjuster.
And Goobs, similar process?
Similar, yeah. The only difference is when it's quite wavy, I probably wind up with a shorter wand than Tom. So then if I'm going very short wand downwind, I'll often bring the right height back up.
Yeah.
So I'm the same in that I like my wand to be full length on port tack, and when I tack, I change the wand length because that's effectively what's changing as you heel your wand relative to your foils getting a bit shorter. So I just change the wand upwind, and then downwind. If it's a flat day, I'd probably just change the wand and leave the right height as well. But if it's a wavy day, I'd over shorten the wand so I have more gearing.
Just to speed the gearing.
And then I'd bring the right height back up.
Yeah. So the thing what's going on there, guys, as the wand gets shorter, it operates further forward, and as a result, speeds the gearing up in that respect. Whereas if a Mach 2, the paddle sits quite a long way aft in it, and where the radius is, you end up with a slower gearing. Obviously, you can adjust the gearing on top as well, but it all interacts with each other, and it's just the circle you've got to go around of it all. Anyway, we'll move on, and so foiling week then. Slingers, you sort of walked away with this one a bit. I'm guessing, well, I know Goobs and Francesco both had some gear damage, which took them out for a day. But Slingers, why don't you just talk us sort of through the racetrack there and how it was different to, obviously, we're onto the World Championship racetrack now, and how it changed from Torbole.
So we moved up the lake to Malcesine, obviously lighter winds at Malcesine compared to Torbole, and instead of a right-hand track, it's generally a left-hand track. It's actually a really tricky course. You know that the left-hand side is stronger, but it can get very patchy on the left-hand side, and being able to get in there and do a foiling tack and get out of the left-hand side gets tough. I think it's going to be a really interesting Worlds. Like at the moment, my boat handling for some reason is getting worse the more I train. So I'm going in reverse every time I go out and practice tacking. I seem to get worse. So at the moment, my strategy, it's really going to be based around how good my tacks are for the Worlds, how hard I want to get into the left, and how many times I'll take a bite of the left-hand side. At the moment, with my tacking quite bad, I'm usually going in there once off the start and then tacking out and basically doing a long port tack all the way to the starboard ley line, the right-hand ley line coming in. Usually it's been roughly about 100 metres short of the top marks. But the good sailors, and my goal is to improve my tacking and be able to get back into the left-hand side again. If my tacks are good, I would probably do an extra one tack at least, or two tacks into the left-hand side up the course. Lighter breezes, I seem to be a little faster when it gets softer compared to Goobs. Goobs, I'm probably a little bit quicker in general than Goobs, and he's got a little bit better boat handling and races a bit better in the last month. But as it gets a bit lighter, I feel a bit stronger. And we're not too sure why that is, I guess. But yeah, it's turning into a really good racetrack. And at foiling week, Goobs was unfortunate and had a gear breakage and put him out of 4 races. And Francesco missed the last day of racing for a cycling race he was doing. But in general, I was pretty strong. I was fast upwind, fast downwind. I've got a little edge on everyone downwind. Goobs and I aren't too sure about the reasoning for that. I think it's probably done in moding and being potentially a bit more accurate sailing downwind, because I put a huge emphasis on that. We think it could be something like that, or maybe it's slightly stiffer mast that I have. I usually have a Goobs runs a point. Actually, no, we have the same mast now, but I was running slightly stiffer, but now we're pretty equal. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Someone like Nathan Outridge and a Mach 2, if the Mach 2 is going pretty quick, I think the Beaker will be faster, but his boat handling and manoeuvring, being able to get into that left-hand side and get out without falling off the foils, that'll be a really interesting battle. And any of the top Exocet guys, they'll be like that. And then if there's a good Beaker sailor who's got great boat handling and can constantly go into lighter air on the left-hand side and get out without being scathed, I guess, they're going to be looking really good.
Yeah. And so, Goobs, foils-wise, you've talked about all the foils you've got between you and Slingers there. You're talking about here this trickier, lighter racetrack, lighter air on the left. Are you putting on a bigger foil to try to get in there and do the nice tack, or you're just going for what's quickest on the day? And how are you making that foil choice on the day?
I think for me personally, I'm aiming to go for what's quickest on the day.
Yeah,
I'd like to think that with a little bit more training, by the time I get there, I should be able to be good enough at boat handling to put the right foil on for the day and be confident that be able to get the manoeuvres sorted.
So on that though, I mean, the big thing always with rig setup is set up for the lulls. With foils, do you set up for the lulls or set up for the windy bits?
Well, I mean, provided the lulls are over 9 knots, I think you can set up for the windy bits. It's just when it gets down to that sort of breeze strength where you might struggle to pop that you might need to start thinking about getting the larger foil on.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that extra small, it doesn't feel like it labors to take off in 9 or 10 knots. It's just when it probably takes off a knot later than the V4 and probably 2 knots later than the V3, I guess.
Yeah, got it.
And with my maneuvers, at least, when it goes wrong, it's not normally an area thing. It's not like I've lost enough speed that I'm going to drop off the foils. It's more that I've got the heel wrong. These boats, it might be because of the really long verticals, but they seem really sensitive to heels through the tack. And so if you feel like you're getting a little bit of leeward heel on the new side, it can be really hard to recover that. It feels like I do the best tacks when I'm actually not trying to rush it and I can steer nice and slow through. And the whole time I'm just steering for flat boat. Because when you just go back, it's a bit different in that way than the Exocet or the Mach 2. I think with the Exocet and the Mach 2, it feels like you really need to get it through head to wind and hit the wing and pop it up like that. But these they coast for quite a while. And I reckon that's because the hulls have less aero drag. And so they're less affected through the eye of the breeze. And you can kind of do a slow turn. And as long as you don't mess the heel up, it doesn't feel like you lose enough speed to really drop off.
Yeah, got you. And everyone listening, if you feel free to type a question in the chat here, and we can ask these guys here what whilst they're here. Feel very free. And Flipper's here; he'll grab the questions and pass them in to Tom and Iain here. Now, whilst we're talking, Garda is always hard for gear choices because you sit there in the morning eating your pizza, there's no wind. Then you have an ice cream, you want it to get windy, and there's still no wind. And then, how are you choosing? Foils you can do a bit later, but masts, how are you choosing what mast you got to put on, what sail you got to put on? I mean, let's talk about non-deck sweeper sails a bit later, but how are you making your mast choices? And Goob, why don't you go first? Let us know.
It's hard for me. Tom touched on it before, but he's as soon as it's hiking conditions, he's really quick in a straight line. So I think he's been erring on the stiffer side, knowing that if it's windy, he's going to be just fine. He'll be able to take that power, and it might cost him a little bit, but he'll still be faster than the majority of the fleet. And then if it gets lighter, he should be in a good spot as well because he's got a stiffer rig on. Whereas with me, it feels like if I'm going to compete against Tom in a straight line in the breeze, I almost need to be a step softer than him on the rig.
And so what mast are we talking about there? The medium, or are we softer than that?
Yeah, so I guess my go-to at the moment is probably the 1-1, and Tom's go-to is probably the 1 base and the 1 tip from CST. And Tom's go-to is probably, I'll let him speak, but it's probably more the 1 base and the 2 tip and he runs a slightly longer prodder than I do as well. And so it's always a bit of a tricky one for me to pick whether I'm going to stick with the 1-1 or go to the 1-2, because there's a few lulls out there.
Yeah. And Tom, why don't you let us know what's your thought process in the morning on mast choice?
Yeah, obviously Lake Garda is really tough. You sit there and it's glass all morning, or you've got the northerly breeze and then it shuts down and you've got a rig. And so really what we were running in Malcesine was, I think Goobs and I were on a page called Swiss Metro, and it's wind forecasting for Switzerland, but it actually goes over to Lake Garda. And we found that pretty good. It was the best one we used. And we were just using that as a general, how much wind are we going to get? Is it going to be pumping? Is it going to be a bit softer? When might the wind fill in? And I was basically blindly following Swiss Metro at the end. If it looked like it was going to be a little softer, my go-to was the one bottom, 2 top. And I would rig that up in zero wind, obviously, as there's no wind when we have to make the decision. I'll just rig that up and just hope. And then if it looked like on Swiss Metro it's going to be a little windier, I would probably go for a 1-1 mast combination, and I'll just rig it up even if it's glass out there and just hope. That was generally the way we made the mast choices. You have to really, you're obviously looking, are there clouds around? Is this breeze going to come in? What's the weather like? Is it cold, warm? Yeah. And you're just taking that into account. And then we're just going, okay, everything's good signs here for a nice thermal breeze, nice aura. And I would rig my mast selection for a little more breeze if everything looked like it was lining up. But yeah, everyone's going to have to make that decision. You're going to have to pick a mast without being able to see how much wind is on the racetrack.
And you're never putting a stiffer base on than the one, then, either of you?
I've only had one mast base for the last since I got my boat, but I do have a number 2 base on the way, which I've been testing, as Goobs so I touched on. I've been testing stiffer and stiffer masts. I basically now run anywhere from I've had a 1 base and I go up to a 4 top, which is really stiff for CST. It's their stiffest top section. And then I'm now going to start trying a bit of 2 base, and maybe I'm concerned more about my light air performance than I am about my heavy air performance. So I'm looking at a stiffer mast at maybe a 2 base and a 4 top for super light airs. That might be too stiff, but I'm going to test that when I get back. And but my go-to is probably a 1-2 in general for the 12, 14 knots would be my go-to.
Got you. And so it sounds like, you run a slightly stiffer rig than Goobs. You're a bit heavier, probably a bit more used to the hiking side of things. And what about spreaders then? I know we certainly talked a few weeks ago about prodder lengths and spreader setups. Boats have changed geometries. Wings have got further back, so now everyone's got these massive, great big spreaders. How are you finding the setup of spreaders, and what sort of numbers can you share, or is it still a bit of a black art?
I don't know if I can share actual numbers because I've forgotten them. But yeah, look, coming from the Exocet to the Beaker, I feel like my equivalent masts are setting up softer. I'm able to get the head of the north sail to break a little earlier than I did on my Exocet. So I'm starting to go down a stiffer road at the moment. I don't know if I'm going down the right road, and I've got plenty of boat speed at the moment, so I'm skeptical. I'm just trying to get everything sort of the sail lined up right. And yeah, I think the reason why the north sets up a bit flatter and with the same mast combo on the Beaker is because of the spreader geometry. And I mean, the person who really developed the Beaker setup was Scott Babbage, who's a little bit lighter, so he prefers softer setup than what I would, being 10 kilos heavier than him. So yeah, with spreaders, I run the amount of poke I run. Basically, has got to do with how much bang I'm pulling on. I've sort of got a real good feeling for how much bang I pull on, and that's the same time and time again. And so I pull on bang until I basically, and to what it feels like about my mark, and I've got marks all over it. And if my leeward side of the sail is breaking more, the telltale's breaking before the windward side, I generally add some poke. I don't like the leeward side breaking before the windward side. That's just my way of sailing. Whereas I've seen Goobs' set up, he runs a little flatter down low and he's happy for that to happen. And so I add poke. So from a standard beaker, I'd probably be right now around 30 mil more poke and the same shroud position. And I run a little bit more poke than normal. I like a little bit deeper setup in the bottom and flatter in the top. And that's where I've ended up. And as Goobs says, every time Goobs tries to come to my settings, he has no go forward mode. And when I go to his setting, I feel like I'm too low. So that's got to do with different weights. And so it's what suits your sailing style. I probably sail with a little bit more windward heel than Goobs. So I might need that a little bit deeper bottom just to keep the bite and make sure I don't get too much windward heel and have to bear away. And yeah, I'll adjust my prodder probably anywhere up to about 70, 80 mils during a day. And I adjust it, and I've got a pin, and I'll adjust it at the 5-minute gun pretty much religiously. You'll see me in the water. I've made my call on what pinhole I want my prodder in, and I jump in the water, change it, and jump back on at 5 minutes to go. And that's just basically, okay, the breeze has died off from the last race. I want a bit more power, and I add 20 mil roughly of poke to the bottom.
So you make that front spreader longer, stiffens up the mast, straightens a bit. You can pull a bit more bang, tighter leash, gruntier sail.
Mm-hmm.
And Goobs, you find the same, but being a bit lighter, you just generally run it a bit shorter.
Yeah, I probably don't go as extreme as Tom, but I think that's another reason why we both have only been using one base is the prodder length has such a big bearing over the stiffness of that bottom section.
Yeah. And
we've got these, we've now both got adjustable prodders that you have so much range.
Yeah.
You can put a stiffer tip in and you can change your prodder length to be a bit longer, and actually the sail will set up pretty nicely. Whereas if you couldn't change that prodder length, I think you'd overbend the bottom and you'd over flatten the bottom of the sail. So I'm probably adjusting it a little bit less than Tom. I'm probably 40 mil of range, and maybe in an extreme case I might go 60 if it's really light, and I'm struggling, I'll go a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think it has a big bearing on your downwind speed, because it seems like downwind, Tom, with the extra poke on his prodder, I think you can carry a little bit more bang without flattening the sail. And his standard looks a little bit less twisted than I am, but sheet out. And I think it's powerful, but it's also low drag as well, compared to just trying to get all the depth back in the sail, but carrying quite a bit of twist as well.
Yeah.
When I try to pull the bang on, I think I over flatten the sail compared to what his looks like. So that's where that difference comes from.
I mean that's the hard thing, isn't it? Getting the drive back, getting the power back into the sail, having gone upwind in a super flat mode, getting around the top mode, trying to get everything off, get the juice back in the sail, and then trying to not have too much twist without flattening the sail again. And I'm sure with the longer prodder that helps. Just quickly before we move on a bit, rig tension wise, where are you guys at with that now? Are you trying to go loose and cant a bit, or are you getting them tighter again?
Yeah, I was really loose when I arrived in Lake Garda. I was aiming for roughly 50 mil of cant, and I have been tightening it up, and now I'm very, very firm. And the reason for that is my boat handling is not going great. my tacks aren't going great, and so I'm trying to do anything I can to lock things in and take out variables. And with the cant, it can come over, it can flop in at different times. So I'm trying to take out that variable and improve my tacking. So that's my reason for going tighter. Do I think it's quicker? I think a little bit of cant is actually faster, sub 14 knots. If I could, in a perfect world, I would have about roughly 50 mil of cant in anything under 14 knots a breeze, and I would have no cant above 14 knots. So for Malcesine, the world's, it's generally lighter than 14 knots. I'm unsure whether to put the cant in again. It's so many things dependent on my boat handling and how that goes over when I arrive back to Garda a week before the Worlds. And yeah, I mean, perfect world, I would have about roughly 40, 50 mils of cant for Malcesine, but I don't at the moment.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, it's Flipper here. Sorry, just before Goobs goes, another question for you while you're on the topic is you were mentioning adjusting the prodder. Do you also adjust the sides?
No, I don't. Not at the moment, at least. I've fixed that off, and yeah, I've got a custom set of spreaders. I can't adjust the sides, and my reasoning is I'm not an expert in masts and moving shroud positions and things like that, and how that's going to affect me. And so it's not something I'm comfortable with yet, but hopefully soon. My next boat, I'm aiming to get a adjustable set of to adjust my shrouds on the go, and yeah, and then I'll play with that a lot more and try to learn a bit more there.
Okay, good one. Maybe Goobs, you could touch on the on your adjustment of the prodder and the sides as well when you do your tension stuff.
Yeah. So I'm the same as Tom with the custom spreader. But, so we don't actually have the capability of adjusting the sides. We've only just got the prodder. But we adjust that quite a lot. I guess the prodder, you could think of it as stiffening up in the 4.5 cents. And when you're pulling on the vang, if you've got a really long prodder, it'll stand the leach up without flattening the sail too much. And then if you're shortening your prodder, you're obviously flattening the sail more with the vang, and you're probably not going to get as much leach return. And then your side stays, I think they're obviously giving the mast some side support, and also the angle of them is pretty critical as to how much 4.5 support it gives relative to, compared to how much side support it gives as well. We're locked off on those at the moment. I think the geometry of the side spreaders on the beaker is a big reason why Tom's feeling like his mast is setting up for the same mast. He's setting up flatter on the beaker than on the Exocet. I think with the wings moving further back on the beaker, it's meaning that the sweep on the spreaders is a bit more, which is
it's very critical now as we go longer on spreader arms with the shroud base so far back. You increase, obviously you get a wider spreader, which is nice for a bit of power, but you increase your deflection very, very quickly. And so you need to basically, full adjustable one would be like an old school 471 with some turnbuckles. You can actually change the sweep and have a length, and then just fiddle away. At the moment, we're in the process of, well, I want to change my spreaders, and you cut and shut them, which we need to go heavy old school for a few weeks, and spend a bit of time fiddling. So I do think long with less deflection will be certainly good for powering it up. But the spreaders we're ending up with are going to be pretty big for these boats with the wings so far back. But that will all come down the line. Goobs, just quickly on your rig tension, where were you finding you like to cant?
So when I used to have an Exocet, I played with it a lot. I used to have a canting rig, and I used to have an adjustable forestay. And I found a similar thing to Tom. I actually thought it was better downwind all the time to have a little bit of cant. I felt it powered the boat up because you're always sailing with a little bit of windward heel. And upwind, I thought in the light stuff, a little bit of camp was nice. But then once it got windy, I felt like I was a little bit bound up if I had too much canter.
Yeah.
With the beaker, I haven't set it up on the boat. And I'm just all about trying to get as fast as I can upwind in sort of 12 or 13 knots at the moment. I think for me, that's minimal camp. And it's going to help attacking as well.
And tell me, Goobs, where are you getting to with, essentially Moth sailors? You've got a main sheet, you've got a kicker and a Cunningham. Where are you getting to with your Vang and your Cunningham? What, how hard are you pulling?
Yeah, Tom touched on it before. I think you can definitely overpull the Vang if you're using a soft rig. And I'm sort of trying to use that lured telltale as a sign that I've maybe overdone it. So I'm sort of getting the Vang to a point where I think the sail's looking nice. And then I'm using the Cunningham to mode in and out of gusts a little bit. But if a sign for me that I've overpulled the Vang or that the prodder's a little bit too short for my setup at that time is that that lured telltale's starting to get some detachment. So, and then for that race, I'll just ease some Vang and I'll ease a little bit of Cunno and I'll try to deepen up the entry a bit.
So what you're feeling there is front of the sail getting too fine, hard to keep attachment on it. It gets very sensitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And also in Malcesine, where the breeze is a little bit more shifty and it's up and down in the lulls, you really want to have something that's a little bit tolerant to angle of attack change. And when you're fine on the entry, that's it makes it really hard, because if you get a little bit inaccurate and you don't quite read the breeze right, and you've got a lot of windward heel coming into a gust, your next step is to pull the main on. And when you're really fine on the entry, if you're over trimmed on the main, you shut the whole thing down.
Yeah. I mean, keeping those lure telltales is key, isn't it? And I think that's a classic, is over trimming the Moth, certainly downwind and, in light air, losing all the flow and it's game over. So, I mean, you both talked about the lower part of the mainsails. Do you worry about the top part? I mean, slingers, do you look up at the top part of the sail upwind, or you just let it do its own thing? Or
yeah, I'm always looking up. Really, the top part of the sail for me is just really adjusted by Cunningham. I'm deciding how much shape I want in the top. For me, upwind, I basically try to get to full power, which is fully hiking as much windward heel as I want. And then from there, if the wind increases from there, I start to try to break the top of the sail. What I talk about when I'm talking about breaking the top of the sail, I guess, is like a windsurfer sail. It sort of goes a bit floppy and inverts. So once I'm at full power, I can't flatten anything else. I've got Vang on, I've got windward heel, I'm hiking as hard as I can. If I'm still constantly easing main sheet to get the boat going, I'll bring on more Cunningham, which will break the top of the sail. In the Exocet for the Perth Worlds, my goal really was probably maybe 17, 18 knots of wind speed when I'd like to break the top of the sail. Maybe a tiny bit less, 16. But in the Beaker, for whatever reason going on, I think it might be we're sailing a little higher in general with the less drag platform setup. But I'm breaking it probably at about 14 knots of wind speed, a little bit lower speeds. But so yeah, the top of the sail for me. And then as soon as I'm looking for power, my first movement is to try to deepen up the head at the top of the sail. And so I'm just using the Cunningham to control that. Yeah.
So pre-start, you've gone upwind, you've done your little, check in with the breeze and everything. What's your cue to then shorten or lengthen that product? If you're max money in and you're still overpowered?
Yeah, exactly. If I max Vang max Cunningham, still overpowered, and my one thing I say is if my windward telltale at the bottom, I watch my bottom telltales more than my top quite a lot, because that's the setup of my Vang. And so if I'm at my marks on my Vang and my Cunningham and I've got the windward telltale going, that means I'm too deep in the bottom and I'll reduce the spreader poke. So if that's constantly going on my settings, I'll capsize and I'll make the poke on the front spreader. I'll reduce that by 20 mil, and then I'll go again and check that it's right. I want those two telltales at the bottom flowing. With sort of, if one of them's going to break, I want it to be the windward side. But if perfect world, they're both connected at all times.
And where, you talk about, main sheet eased. Where do you like to have your main sheet blocks? Are you talking 6 inches of ease for where you want to be ideal, the correct amount of power?
Yeah, I'd say upwind, I'm looking for block to block to 6 inches of ease. If I find myself constantly block to block, I'll deepen up the sail a little bit more. If I find myself further than 6 inches all the time, I'll flatten the sail. That's probably about bang on for upwind sailing. And downwind, I'm probably looking for at least the middle zone to be at least a foot of ease. Sort of, I don't know how many inches that is, but 300 mil of ease in the as my medium point downwind. That way, I've always got quite a bit of main sheet I can pull on to save myself from windward heel or a light patch. And for me, I like sailing with more Vang on downwind and more ease in the sheet, a little more windward heel. That suits my sailing style. I sail fast and high downwind. And again, this is a personal preferencing. Other people like to sail a little bit deeper in the sail, a little bit lower and a little bit slower mode than me. In general, when you see me sailing downwind in the pack of boats, I'm probably sailing 5 degrees higher, but I'm sailing a faster mode, and that works for my VMG. It worked a lot better in Torbelley, being more wind than it does in Malcesine, but it still works in Malcesine as long as I do it at the right times. I don't want to be sailing high and fast into less wind.
Yeah, got you. All right, let's just move on a little bit, because I want to not keep everyone forever. We've touched on this a lot, boat handling. I had a question here, Garda's critical boat handling, because we know, as you've said, Slingers, it's probably a 3 or a 5 tack beat up the left for Malcesine. Obviously, Torbelley was a bit different. How, you've both had, well, Goobs, you've had the Exocet before, which is the Rolls Royce. How does your new boat compare, and what, how has it changed how you're going into these events and thinking about it all?
Yeah, I think the main thing I've noticed is that these things feel a lot more sensitive to heel through the maneuver. And actually, it's a lot harder to save it if you get the heel wrong early in the maneuver. Because with the Exocet, I think you can just hold the turn and move the body weight a little bit, and everything will come right. I think if you get the heel wrong early in this boat, it's really hard to get it back. So that's been my main focus, especially for tacking, is just maybe always just slightly leading the heel to the outside of the turn, but not trying to steer through too fast, and really actually altering the steering a little bit as you go based on what the heel of the boat's doing. I actually really like the solid wings. I've never used solid wings before, just for tacking and jibing. I think that compared to when I sailed the Exocet and the Mach 2, it lets you move through the boat a little bit smoother. You can, I always used to jump from the middle of the boat to the wing tramp, and that would be me. And then I'd tuck my feet under the hiking strap, and I'd be going on the other side. Whereas on the Exocet with the solid wings, you can, you've got enough grip to actually crawl through a bit, so you can do a slower transition of your body weight.
Yeah. And so we've got now beakers, some with solid, some with soft. Slingers, you've gone soft on your boat. What are you, is that weight reasoning, or some? I've had a question actually before this webinar started, is that, there was a video of you doing a really nice foiling tack, and could you achieve that with hard wings, or is the soft tack, do you think it makes boat handling better or worse?
I think it's a real personal preference thing. I haven't really sailed too much with the solid wings. The reason I went for The soft wings is for weight. We work, Kyle Langford and myself we're talking with Mackay Boats who build beakers, and we worked out there's a little weight gain to go soft wings and run our control systems inside the soft wings compared to having a tunnel in the middle of the boat, which most of the beakers have. So I went with it because it's a little weight gain. 100%, would you be able to do the tack I put on my Instagram the other day? 100%, that'd be absolutely fine with the hard wings. The hard wings have more grip, and like Goob says, you can actually crawl around a little bit and move small amounts and still have grip. With my soft wings, people will see that I've actually got wax on there. I've tried all different strips, and they all seem to come off. I can start stitching grip tapes in, but grip is an issue for me in the soft wings. And I'm actually running wax now, surfboard wax, and it works really well for me. So I prefer, I quite like my soft wings. If I ordered a new boat, I'm unsure what I'd go for. It depends on the weight difference. But I've got a little bit lighter boat than Goobs, but he's probably got a little bit more grip for boat handling.
Yeah, got you. All right, so very much personal preference, but I think we all know that, the newer boats are getting harder to sail, and that's kind of par for the course with evolution of it, isn't it?
Yep.
All right, just on boats then, I mean, I think Italy and Europe in general, there's always a lot of different boats, but, I guess we've got Mantas going very well. The Exocet, which obviously was the leader, is maybe struggling a bit, and we saw Goody struggling a little bit in an Exocet. Beaker going very well. I mean, Goobs, even if you're looking at the Manta and the Beaker, you'd think there's some, aero stuff going on there. I mean, maybe the Manta does have great aero. What are your thoughts on all of that? From your sort of cut background, you've probably looked at all these boats.
I mean, they're obviously trying to take advantage of the lured wing shape to get a little bit of riding moment back. Whereas I think the Beaker's gone the other way. They've sort of said it's going to be hard to make that work. Let's make these things as small as we possibly can, so as they're not draggy at all. Me and Tom actually went for a sail in the Manta, and it feels nice, but it's just a completely different feel to what we're used to. So it's really hard for us to compare until we spend a little bit more time, or until I spend a little bit more time in that boat anyway. But I was impressed with how the Manta was going. There's some good sailors sailing, but they're actually a little bit lighter than what I am, and a fair bit lighter than what Tom is. And they were making it work. We were quite a bit quicker in a straight line, but they were maybe a touch higher and a touch down on VMG, but for the body weight of the guys who were sailing it, I thought it was actually pretty impressive down in Torbelley and in.
And Slingers, what do you think of the new aero set, the new Exocet, which is conceptual at the moment? It looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it looks very interesting. Obviously, it's just super low volume hull, so it's very low drag. I would hate to, as being an 85 kilo guy, try to take off in light airs in that thing. I don't think it would be very forgiving at all. But if you're for foiling conditions, it's looking a pretty low drag. I think the front wing bar shape is quite interesting. I'm not entirely sure what they got going on there, what Kevin Elway's going for, but he's obviously got a theory behind it. I didn't know if it was sort of to cover your legs a bit, get a little bit of a shadow behind the legs, the front wing bar kicking up and hiding the control systems and stuff, the aero there. But it's interesting. It looks good. But yeah, like Goob said, there's a couple of boats which are really going for adding riding moment on the leeward wing and attachment upwind, and the Manta's probably leading that. And when those guys, they felt really quick upwind when they're on their VMG upwind course, and as soon as we had to crack sheets, we've overlaid a little bit, or for whatever reason you need to go fast mode, it really was noticeable that they would lose attachment on the leeward wing, and the beaker was much quicker. If we had to sail around at sort of 10 degrees below your VMG course, the beaker is much faster than the manta or any boats really looking for that attachment of flow. But when they do link up that flow and they get attachment on the leeward wing, they say that they get a riding moment gain, and I believe it. And they are very quick upwind in a straight line at a VMG upwind angle.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, there's plenty more. Obviously, there's a new Luca Damic's got a new boat coming out, which TV's going to be sort of putting through its paces in the next months. There's the new Maverick in the UK, and I'm sure a couple more. So over the next couple of years, I think we'll see plenty more interesting boats coming out. Righto then. Just to wrap up then, 4 to 5 weeks till the Worlds. Malcesine, end of season, it's going to be tricky. Sails, are you guys going to have non-deck sweeper sails? Goobs, what are you thinking? You had a 3DL, which you brought out the antique cupboard. Are you going to have that as an option, or are you just de-essing it?
At this stage, I'm thinking of just de-essing it. So like you said, I've got actually an old Elite 23 CST rig that suits the VI7 really well for the light air, and I've got that in my box. But what that would mean then is I would only be able to use one rig for the deck sweeper. And what we're finding more and more in Garda is that the breeze is either going up or down, and I really think that there's such a small window to want to use that big rig with the big sail that kind of erring on always going deck sweeper and having 2 rigs for the deck sweeper, and it'll make rigging up in the morning a lot less stressful, because it's always pretty scary chucking up a completely different concept to the guys around you, and I'm not sure how many people are going to go for the full size option.
Did you see many full size sails down there?
Not in the front group of boats. There's obviously a lot of people still using full size sails, but in the top 5 or 10, I don't think there were many. I used my VI7 one day in one race that got abandoned at foiling week, and I did it because I don't actually have a large foil yet. I've been waiting on the V6, which I've now got, but I haven't used yet. And so I was really stressing that I had a small foil and it was really light. And so I threw up the big sail, and I think it did help me in takeoff. And I think it was pretty rapid downwind compared to a lot of the other guys. But upwind, I think I was suffering a little bit. And then I don't reckon it would have taken the breeze to build very much at all until I would have been out of range on it.
Yeah, got you. And slingers, you thinking just DS as well?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards 2 DS sails, measuring in. We've got the standard BI9, which is a standard for a beaker deck sweeper, which for us, that's all we've been using, really. We've asked for a lighter air sail for the Worlds, which essentially is just, what is it? You would know probably more than me, Rob, but 1% deeper, a little bit more draft aft. It's essentially to help us get a little bit more power in the maybe 9 to 11 knots, obviously below that, but 9 to 11 knots where we're not really able to get full windward heel on the beaker. We can't quite power the boat up enough in those conditions. So we're trying to be a little bit deeper, and so hopefully get to full power, a knot or 2 less wind. So that's our thinking there, measuring in 2 deck sweepers, one that's your all-rounder and one that's a little bit more, I guess, Malcesine suited, a little lighter air. And then I do have the standard, I guess it's called the VI9, the full-size sail, which is now a 3DI full-size sail. That, as Goob said, I actually would love to use that sail. I think it's great, but in Lake Garda, the wind seems to be going up from unsaleable conditions to comfortably foiling, or decreasing from comfortably foiling to unsaleable. And there's not a lot in that 6 knots steady. If we were racing on the Mediterranean, I'd measure in this sail, which because you could get steady 5 to 8 knots of wind all day, and I would run the full size sail on a 5300 mast. I would run that all the time, but here in Lake Garda, the wind is increasing or decreasing, so I'm leaning towards measuring in 2 deck sweeper sails.
Yeah, got you. And then your 2 masts are probably, well, sounds like you, Goobs, are probably going to be the 1 and the 2, and Slingers maybe a 2 and a 3.
Yeah. I think I'll probably measure in a 1 and a 2 bottom section, and then for the top section, I might measure in at the moment I'm probably leaning towards a 1 top and a 4. I don't have a 3 top, but I've got a 4 top, so a really stiff top section. So at the moment I'd lean to probably a 1 and I'd run a 1-1 in 14 knots and up, 13 knots and up, and I would run a stiffer top section than that for lighter conditions.
Yeah, got you. Goobs, you sort of, so you're the DS and the masts as the 1 and the 2 as well.
Yeah, 1 base. I think I'm just happy with the 1 base, to be honest. And then just changing my product length with that base, and then I'll probably end up with 1 tip and 3 tip, I think, now.
Got you. And so you got 2 weeks of training now before the Worlds. Well, you get through Denmark's LGP, and then you've got a bit of training. What are you going to be focusing on? Is it boat handling? Is it speed? Is it, different setups, developing new kit? What's the plan?
Me, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I think for me, I just need to, when I get back there, do a fair bit of boat handling. We've been doing a lot of speed work, and it's getting really frustrating in the races where we're going so fast, but we're going so fast, but then losing places because we're missing tacks and missing jives and capsizing. And so when I left Garda, I was thinking to myself, I just need to get there and do a heap of tacks and a heap of jives. So as when we start doing the practice event, I've got that all ticked away, and I can really focus on making the right racing decisions and being sharp when the Worlds comes around.
Yeah. Slingers?
Yeah, same thing. Our boat speeds are really good. We've done quite a bit of speed testing and dialed in we know we've got the right platform, we know we've got the right sails and masts, and we know we're in really good shape in that area. And so it's boat handling. It's just so frustrating for me. I'll go out and concentrate on boat handling, and I'll nail 25 out of 25 tacks in practice, and then as soon as I start racing, I'll miss 24 out of 25 tacks. So every day I go out and concentrate on my tacking, I can do it 100%. And then as soon as the race starts, so I don't know what, it's all mental for me, I guess, but for sure, I've got to work on my tacks.
This is classic for 95% of the fleet. You suddenly blasting towards the ley line, you're like, right, I've got a tack, and you think about it and you cop it up, and I think
it's exactly what's going on with me. And yeah, I guess maybe a few people on this call think that sort of stuff doesn't happen for the top guys. It does, and it's really weird. I'm really thinking about it so closely now. It's probably not a good thing, but it's for me. I think it is what's going on is I think because you've pretty much always got a boat on your hip, and you always look over your shoulder when you want to tack, and you go, okay, I've got to do a good tack. There's a guy coming. I need to cross him, whatever it is. I think I'm sailing too high into the tack, and I'm too close to the wind. I think I've actually I got to do a bit more of a speed build and just make sure I'm not too high to the wind, so I can turn up into the wind without the boat going into windward instantly. That's my problem, I think. But yeah, it's the same for everyone. But for Goobs and I guess I'll only get there about 7 days before the event starts, I think, in Garda, and my focus will be on boat handling, because speed we feel comfortable, and it's going to be a matter of if I can improve my tacking, it means I can have more options to get into the left, into the more shift on the left hand side, and not pay a penalty of falling off the foils. So that's going to be my focus.
Yeah. So we're thinking a bit less wind, but probably trying to hang on to the small foils and pull off a few good tacks in some lightish air in the corner, and and job done.
And with Garda, it's going to be really interesting. For example, in foiling week we had 60 boats, but in between races we would rush to shore because the wind had picked up or died off, whatever it had, and try to do a foil change. But there's only about 6 or 7 boats which would take up the ramp space, and they would do their foil change there. And then there's 20 boats who are sitting 10 meters off the dock who have no room to bring their boat in to do a foil change. It's going to be really interesting how they manage that. If we've got a 150 boat fleet, I'd actually have no idea how many people are coming, but foil changes in between races is going to be a really interesting one, and how you do that efficiently, because the ramp is really small in Malcesine, and they've got to figure out a way there. Sorry, that's something I just thought of off the top of my head, but come up with strategies for that.
So Goody's getting a beaker. He should probably have it by now, or close to having it by now. You expect him to take a bit of a step up in the beaker. Obviously, he's not going to have much time in it. Who else? Who's going to be in the fight? Well, Goobs, from who you thinking are your stiff competition other than slingers?
I think Kyle will be very good.
Yep.
I think he's going to be really fast, especially upwind and a little bit of breeze. I think Nath will be really sharp and on the money. And to be honest, I reckon that if it's a lighter event, he could be hard to beat.
Yeah.
Sort of, you get a lot of light days, he could be hard to beat. There's a lot of good guys coming, to be honest. There's Dylan. I think Dylan's coming after the games. He should be pretty handy.
Francesca Bruni obviously will be on the money.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Good. So you guys will train together, or what's your plan? Have you got like a little training pack organised, or you just take it on the fly?
I don't know. There's always a few moths going sailing in Garda. It's nothing really organised, but you sort of down there working on your boat, and there'll be sort of 4 or 5 other guys there when we were there this last month. And you just say, do you want to sail in the morning or the afternoon tomorrow? And you end up with a good fleet all the time. So it's an awesome place to hang out while we're killing some time in between events. That's for sure. I go back. I go now to do a GC down in Portugal, but then I'll be in Garda for 10 days just before the Danish Sail GP event. And I know Nace will be there then as well, and Nikolai and a few others. So there should be from the 6th of August. There should be a few more boats there at Malcesine, and we should have a good little group.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we'll let everyone go and wish both of you the best of luck for the Worlds and the upcoming Sail GP event. And Slingers, well done in Plymouth there. That was fantastic to watch that last race. All weekend, you guys were
He's still got tacking problems.
That's true. That was a
driving problems.
But the rest anyway, guys, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you haven't given away all your secrets, but it's bloody good to hear it from the guys. You make it sound so easy, and it doesn't sound as though there's too much sort of cloak and dagger going on. It's all there for the taking for everyone to come and chat to you and get involved, and it's all very doable. So thank you very much for giving us your time, and until next time.
No problem.
Bye.
Thank you.
There you guys. Thank you.
Cheers.